A little girl stumbles in the cold, her trembling hands reaching for a crutch tossed into the mud. Her tear-streaked face lifts as she whispers, "Please, give it back." In the shadows, a German shepherd growls, and moments later, a father steps into the storm, fury and love burning in his eyes. This is the story of betrayal, resilience, and the healing power of family. Where are you watching from today? Leave us a comment below, and if you believe in second chances, don't forget to subscribe. Wishing you a peaceful day filled with light and hope. Snow had begun falling over Ashford, Colorado, a mountain town where winter arrived early and lingered late. The evening air carried the sharp scent of pine and chimney smoke, while the streets glowed faintly beneath lanterns that flickered against the gusts of wind rushing down from the peaks. The Whitmore home, set apart from the cluster of townhouses near Main Street, stood proudly on a hill, its brick walls glistening with a sheen of frost. To outsiders, it appeared a place of wealth and dignity, but that night its garden hid a secret uglier than the storm clouds brewing overhead. Sergeant Daniel Whitmore walked up the path leading to his house, his boots crunching softly on the snow that had begun to settle. Daniel was 42, a man of broad shoulders and quiet authority, with hazel eyes that bore the weight of years spent staring into human brokenness on patrol. His dark brown hair, streaked with gray near the temples, had grown a little long under his winter cap, and the lines across his face revealed both weariness and restraint. Daniel was not a man who wasted words, yet those who served with him knew his silence could be more commanding than any shouted order. Beneath the navy blue police winter coat, his chest rose and fell with the rhythm of one who lived by discipline but was haunted by regrets of absence at home. He carried a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, inside of which lay a teddy bear he had bought for his daughter, Lily, hoping to surprise her after weeks of long shifts. At his side padded Rex, his loyal German shepherd. Rex was 6 years old, his black and silver coat thick against the cold, his body powerful yet graceful, amber eyes alert to every sound in the night. Trained at the academy, but bonded to Daniel through years of service, Rex was more than a partner. He was the steady shadow that followed wherever danger might lurk. Townsfolk often said the dog's gaze seemed to read the hearts of men, and his scars, one faint mark above the right paw from a barbed fence during a chase, spoke of loyalty sealed in pain. Rex's ears pricked at every shift in the wind, tail low, paws steady. He belonged to no one but Daniel and Lily. As Daniel and Rex neared the garden, laughter drifted faintly from the Whitmore mansion. Clara Whitmore, Daniel's second wife, was hosting another evening of charm and spectacle. Clara was 35, tall with porcelain skin that glowed beneath carefully applied makeup, her auburn hair twisted into a high bun, from which pearls gleamed like tiny stars. She dressed with the precision of someone who needed to be admired, tonight in a golden gown that shimmered under the lights. To outsiders, she was warmth incarnate, smiling with every tooth visible, glass of wine in hand. Yet those who knew her in quieter corners understood there was an edge beneath the surface, a restlessness sharpened by envy and a hunger to belong among the wealthy circles of Ashford's elite. Clara had not grown up with riches. Her youth had been marked by lean winters and ambition that hardened into arrogance. The parties she held were less about community and more about conquest, each guest another jewel in her crown of recognition. Daniel rarely attended. He found little joy in idle chatter of property deals and glittering gowns, preferring the sound of police radios and the company of Rex. Tonight, he had chosen to come home early with the hope of bridging the growing distance between himself and his daughter. Lily Whitmore, 8 years old, had been born into light but carried shadows with her. At 4, she had survived a car accident that claimed her mother's life, her legs permanently weakened. Since then, her crutches had become her constant companions, slim wooden poles polished smooth by her small hands. Lily had long chestnut brown hair often tangled from neglect, storm gray eyes too solemn for her age, and a voice soft but quivering with the fear of abandonment. She wore a plain brown dress tonight, far less splendid than the silks around her stepmother's guests. Yet to Daniel, she was the most beautiful figure in the house. Lily had learned early to silence her needs, shrinking into corners while Clara entertained. Her drawings, scribbled sketches of dogs and stars, were her way of whispering hope into the quiet. On this night, as music swelled inside, Lily had been led outside to the damp grass near the fountain. Clara's hand, once smiling in the sight of guests, turned into an iron grip that yanked the child into the shadows. There, beyond the lantern glow, Clara's mask shattered. She shoved Lily roughly, sending her crutches skidding across the lawn. The little girl tumbled, her dress soaking in mud, her pale hands clawing at the wet ground as she cried out, "Mommy, please, give me back my crutch." Her plea echoed into the cold night, blending with the hiss of falling snow. Clara loomed above, her golden gown gleaming cruelly. Her voice dropped low, sharp as broken glass. "You're nothing but bad luck. Your mother died because of you. You'll drag us all down." Lily's sobs shook her thin frame. She pressed her cheek against the wet earth, tears mingling with dirt, hair clinging to her face. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't want Mama to die." Clara's laughter rang harsh, a brittle sound that cracked through the garden. "Nobody loves you. You are a stain on this family." Rex heard the cry first. His ears twitched, head snapping toward the fountain, muscles taut beneath his fur. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Daniel, following the sound, quickened his steps, the gift box slipping slightly in his hand as dread gripped him. When he emerged from the shadowed archway into the garden, the sight before him nearly drove him to his knees. His daughter, collapsed on the wet grass, reaching with trembling fingers toward her crutch lying just out of reach. Clara, her mouth curled in a smile that was anything but kind, standing above the child like a predator savoring its victory. Rex bristled, amber eyes ablaze, a snarl pulling at his lips. Daniel froze, the teddy bear falling from the box, rolling across the cold stone path. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that began to gather in his chest. The storm of snow had not yet thickened, but the night air was sharp and the lanterns swayed with every gust, their golden halos blurring against the mist of breath that rose from the guests gathered behind the Whitmore mansion. The garden was dressed for spectacle, tables of crystal glasses, silver trays with roasted pheasant, and a canopy of light strung across the hedges. To Ashford's elite, this was Clara Whitmore's masterpiece, a place to remind them she belonged among them, no matter her past. Inside the house, laughter rang like bells of arrogance. City officials in tailored coats leaned against marble counters. Lawyers and bankers adjusted their ties, while women in silk gowns clutched pearls and whispered about land deeds and investments. Clara herself moved among them like a queen. She was tall, poised, every inch of her wrapped in glittering confidence, her golden gown flowing like liquid fire under the lights. She had grown up in a different world, daughter of a seamstress who worked long nights by a gas lamp, father long vanished. Poverty had planted in her a hunger that hardened with age. Clara craved recognition, not just wealth, but the reverence of others. Every smile she offered tonight was a mask carefully carved to conceal the bitterness gnawing beneath. Among the guests was Mayor Henry Cartwright, a heavy-set man of 50 with a ruddy complexion and thinning blonde hair brushed neatly across a broad forehead. His voice was booming and jovial, though often laced with condescension. Years of shaking hands and making deals had left him with an instinct for power plays. He liked Clara because she could entertain his donors and flatter his ego. When he raised his glass and called her Ashford's golden hostess, Clara's smile widened, though her eyes flickered with cold satisfaction. Near the corner of the grand garden, Lily sat quietly, nearly invisible to the crowd. The little girl's brown dress blended with the shadows of the hedges, and her small hands clutched her crutches tightly, knuckles pale against the wood. Her storm-gray eyes avoided the guests' stares. The music, the chatter, the gowns, all of it made her smaller, as though she were being pressed into the earth. One woman, Margaret Ellis, a kind-hearted librarian of 40 with streaks of silver in her black hair, noticed Lily and whispered to her companion, "She's a sweet child." Margaret was gentle by nature, her thin frame and soft voice often overlooked in gatherings like this. But she had once lost a child to illness, and her gaze carried compassion for any lonely child. Clara, catching the remark, turned her head with a faint, cutting smile. "Sweet? She clings. That's all she knows how to do." The guests chuckled politely, too accustomed to cruelty disguised as wit. Lily lowered her head, her gray eyes trembling with unshed tears. She wanted to disappear, to shrink until no one could laugh or pity her. She had tried once, weeks earlier, to join the other children in town at the playground. But her crutches had slipped in the mud and she had fallen, their laughter chasing her home. Since then she avoided crowds, avoided drawing attention, but Clara's hand would not allow her to vanish. When the music swelled and guests raised their glasses for another toast, Clara's smile thinned. She stepped swiftly across the lawn, her heels clicking like daggers against the stone. She reached Lily and seized her thin arm with a grip that belied her polished smile. To the guests, she was gracious. "Excuse me, little one is shy." But her whisper, low and sharp, pierced Lily's ear. "Follow me. Now. Don't you dare embarrass me." Lily's chest tightened. She shook her head faintly, voice trembling. "Please, I can stay here." But Clara's nails pressed into her skin, and she yanked the child toward the far end of the garden. The guests turned back to their wine and laughter, oblivious or unwilling to interfere. Margaret Ellis watched, lips parting as though to protest, but the mayor's booming voice drowned her hesitation. She looked down, her fingers clenching the hem of her shawl, the memory of her lost child searing her heart. Yet she remained still. Clara pulled Lily past the banquet tables and into the shadowed lawn where the fountain gurgled faintly, its stone edges slick with frost. The music faded into distant echoes, replaced by the harsh rasp of Clara's breath. She released the girl's arm and, with a sudden shove, sent her sprawling onto the damp grass. The crutches tumbled from her reach, landing yards away. Lily's brown dress smeared with mud as her small body hit the earth, her hair falling loose across her pale face. She scrambled, palms sinking into the cold ground, and cried out, "Mommy, please, give me back my crutches! I can't stand!" Her voice was thin, high, piercing the silence with desperation. Clara loomed above, her golden gown brushing against the mud without care, her smile twisting into a grimace of loathing. Her eyes gleamed cruelly. "You're nothing but bad luck. Your mother died because of you. If it weren't for you, she'd be alive." Lily sobbed, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I didn't want her to die. I didn't—" Her words broke, drowned by Clara's shrill laughter. "Nobody loves you. You're a curse. You will always crawl, never walk, never be more than a shadow on this family." The words sank like knives, and Lily curled against the mud, small fingers digging into the grass as if the earth itself might hold her up. Clara bent lower, her whisper venomous. "Your father will see it one day. He'll see you're nothing but a burden." But at that moment, a sound shifted the air. Rex, the German shepherd, had been lying near the porch, his ears twitching at the first cry. Now he surged forward, his muscles coiling, paws tearing across the frosted lawn. His deep growl rolled through the night, breaking through the chatter of the party. Guests turned, startled by the sudden ferocity, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Margaret Ellis clutched her chest, knowing in her heart something had gone terribly wrong. Clara spun toward the sound, her eyes flashing with alarm as she saw the dog bounding closer, snow scattering from his powerful strides, teeth bared in warning. And just behind him, through the archway of the garden, appeared Daniel Whitmore, his figure heavy in his winter police coat, his face hard as stone. In his hand the small gift box slipped and the teddy bear rolled across the stone path, forgotten. He had returned too soon, at the very moment when masks fell away. The storm in the sky thickened, snowflakes tumbling faster, as if nature itself were bearing witness to the truth now revealed in the shadows of the Whitmore garden. Snow thickened in the garden, the flakes drifting faster now, carried by a wind that shook the lantern strings until they flickered like dying stars. The guests froze in their conversations, glasses halfway raised, as the growl of Rex split the night. He bounded forward, fur bristling, amber eyes locked on Clara, his bark snapping through the silence like gunfire. Clara stiffened, her polished mask cracking into panic before she forced her mouth into another smile. Daniel Whitmore stepped out fully from the archway, his boots striking the stone with deliberate weight. The navy coat of his uniform hung heavy on his tall frame, and his hazel eyes, usually measured and steady, burned now with unrestrained fury. In his hand, the gift box sagged until it slipped, the teddy bear tumbling across the path, rolling into the mud. His voice thundered across the garden, low and seething. "Clara, what did you just do?" Guests turned one by one, their chatter dying into whispers. Some drew back, unwilling to be caught in the middle of a family storm, but others craned their necks with morbid curiosity. Among them was Thomas Reed, a real estate lawyer in his early 40s with a lean build and sharp eyes that never missed a scandal. He adjusted his silver spectacles, lips curling into a faint smirk. This was gossip for tomorrow's breakfast table. Standing beside him, Evelyn Marsh, a schoolteacher with soft auburn curls and a modest navy dress, gasped and clasped her hands. Evelyn had taught Lily in 2nd grade, knew her quiet courage in the classroom, and her heart twisted at the sight of the girl crumpled in the mud. Unlike others, Evelyn stepped forward slightly, her face pale but resolute, though her husband tugged her arm to keep her from interfering. Clara raised her chin, golden gown gleaming even in the dim light. Her voice trembled only for a moment before she steadied it with practiced elegance. "Daniel, you're mistaken. You've walked into something you don't understand. I was only teaching her to be stronger. She cries over every little thing. If you keep coddling her, she'll never learn to stand." Her words floated sweetly to the guests, a plea for sympathy disguised as reason. But Daniel's gaze cut sharper than any knife. He strode across the lawn, Rex at his side, until he reached Lily. The little girl, soaked with mud, clutched desperately at his coat as he knelt. Her gray eyes, swollen from tears, searched his face as if begging for assurance that she wasn't the curse Clara had declared her to be. Daniel lifted her into his arms, his voice rumbling low, steady enough for her alone. "You're safe now. I've got you." Clara's smile faltered as Rex circled her, growling softly. The German shepherd's ears stood sharp, his body taut, his presence a warning that no harm would come closer. Guests exchanged glances, unease prickling the air. Thomas Reed whispered to the mayor, his voice laced with amusement. "Looks like the golden marriage has rust." Mayor Cartwright frowned but said nothing, preferring not to involve himself. Evelyn Marsh, however, raised her voice timidly, her words trembling, but true. "I saw her shove Lily. It wasn't teaching. It was cruelty." The whispering crowd hushed at her statement. Clara's eyes narrowed. "And who are you to lecture me? A school teacher?" Her tone dripped disdain, but Evelyn stood straighter, her curls quivering with the cold wind. "A woman who knows a child deserves kindness." Daniel rose to his full height, Lily held close against his chest. His voice carried the weight of a gavel striking judgment. "Get out. Tonight. You will not stay under this roof." Gasps fluttered among the guests. Margaret Ellis, the librarian from earlier, crossed herself quietly, a gesture of sorrow, but also relief. Clara's face paled, her lips tightening. She looked around at the guests as though searching for allies, but most turned their eyes away. Power adored glamour, but it despised scandal, and tonight she had been caught too bare. Maria Alvarez, the housekeeper, stepped into view from the back steps. She was in her early 50s, small and wiry, with a lined face that carried decades of service and endurance. She had worked in households since she was 15, first scrubbing floors, then raising other people's children. Life had made her quiet, but strong, and though she often kept her eyes lowered, her heart had grown fierce loyalty toward Lily, the girl she had seen neglected too often. Maria's dark eyes glistened as she spoke, her accent thick, but her words steady. "Mr. Whitmore, I saw it all." She pushed the child. Enough is enough. Her frail hands clenched the apron at her waist, the courage of a lifetime's silence finally breaking into truth. Clara turned on her, venom flashing. "You dare betray me? After everything I've given you?" Maria's shoulders trembled, but she held her ground, her voice rising with conviction. "I owe loyalty to the child, not to cruelty." The guests began to disperse, unease spreading. Men muttered excuses, women gathered shawls around their shoulders, slipping away into the night, with eyes lowered. Thomas Reed left smirking, already rehearsing how he would retell this story. Evelyn lingered for a moment, catching Daniel's gaze with a small nod of respect, then left with her husband pulling her arm. The garden emptied, leaving only the family, Maria, and Rex. Snowflakes swirled thicker now, blanketing the lawn. Daniel's breath came heavy, his fury still rising like a tide, but his hand stayed gentle on Lily's back as she sobbed into his coat. He turned to Clara, voice iron and unshakable. "You wanted to play hostess tonight. Now you're revealed. Pack your things. If you don't, I'll call the department to remove you myself." Clara's painted smile finally broke. Her hands trembled at her sides, yet her eyes blazed with defiance. "You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll see how fast Ashford turns on a man who lets his weakness show." But Daniel only shifted Lily higher in his arms, pressing his chin to her tangled hair. "My weakness is my strength, and she's the only one who matters," Rex barked once, as if sealing the vow. The night closed in, lanterns dimming, snow covering the mud where Lily had fallen. Inside the mansion, the music had ceased, leaving only silence and the weight of truth revealed. The snowstorm had eased by dawn, leaving Ashford blanketed in silence, the kind of silence that amplifies every sound inside a house. In the Whitmore residence, the clinking of a spoon against porcelain seemed too loud, the creak of floorboards too sharp. Daniel Whitmore sat at the kitchen table, with Lily still asleep upstairs. His hazel eyes, ringed with exhaustion, traced the steam rising from his untouched cup of coffee. He had not slept, his mind replaying the garden scene again and again. The words Clara had hissed, the fear in Lily's eyes, the weight of his own years of absence that had allowed it to fester. Rex rested by the door, head on his paws, amber eyes watching his master, as though sensing the battle raging within. Maria Alvarez moved quietly about the kitchen, her short frame barely reaching the shelves, her hands steady though her face bore deep creases of fatigue. She had remained awake most of the night, tidying after the scattered remnants of the party once the guests had scurried away. For years, Maria had kept silent, convinced that speaking would cost her the only livelihood she had. But the sound of Lily's plea, echoing in the garden, had broken something inside her. She now worked not only as housekeeper, but as guardian in her own right, determined to shield the child from shadows that might linger. Daniel's phone buzzed against the table. He hesitated, then answered. On the other end was Captain Howard Blake, head of Ashford's precinct, a man in his late 50s with a burly frame and a gravelly voice that had intimidated rookies for decades. Blake had thinning white hair cropped close to his scalp and a blunt, no-nonsense demeanor. Yet beneath his hardened exterior lay a loyalty to his officers, forged during riots in his younger days. He had always trusted Daniel's judgment. This morning, his voice carried concern. "Sergeant Whitmore, rumors are moving fast. People are whispering about what happened at your house. Clara has friends, and she'll use them. Be careful. And Daniel, take some leave. For Lily," Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'll handle it. But thank you, sir." He hung up, the words lingering. Take some leave. For Lily. He had never taken time, not once in years, always convinced duty was paramount. Now, duty stared at him from upstairs in the form of a fragile girl who believed she was cursed. Later that morning, as sunlight broke through the gray, Daniel drove Lily to her physical therapy session. She sat quietly in the back seat, crutches resting beside her, Rex's head poking between the seats, his warm breath puffing against her cheek. Lily's storm-gray eyes remained fixed on the snowy world rushing past, but her hand absently stroked Rex's ear. Daniel caught the gesture in the mirror. Rex was her anchor when words failed. At the clinic, they met Dr. Elaine Foster, a woman in her early 40s with short sandy hair and a lean, athletic build. Elaine had once been a marathon runner, but a knee injury ended her career. Instead of retreating into bitterness, she had turned to pediatric rehabilitation, believing she could help children reclaim the mobility she herself had lost. Her blue eyes were sharp but kind, her movements precise. She greeted Lily with gentle firmness. "We're going to try small steps today. No pressure. Just one at a time." Lily's thin frame trembled as she attempted to rise, her hands gripping the crutches too tightly. Elaine crouched beside her, lowering her voice. "It's not about perfection. It's about trying again, even if you fall." Lily nodded faintly, her lips pressed into a line. Daniel watched, his fists clenched, resisting the urge to scoop his daughter up and spare her the strain. Rex sat obediently at the edge of the mat, eyes fixed on Lily, a silent sentinel. When Lily stumbled and nearly fell, Elaine caught her with steady hands. "Good. That's good," she said softly. "Because you tried." For the first time, a flicker of something, pride or relief, lit Lily's face. Daniel's chest ached at the sight, torn between shame for the years she had endured without him and gratitude that he was here now. While Lily worked, Daniel stepped outside to clear his head. The lobby of the clinic buzzed faintly with patients and staff. At the reception desk sat Karen Doyle, a woman in her late 20s with cropped black hair and a bright smile, though her eyes hinted at weariness. She had grown up in Ashford, caring for younger siblings after her father's death, and carried into adulthood a resilience that manifested in kindness toward strangers. She noticed Daniel's heavy expression and offered gently, "Your daughter's in good hands. Dr. Foster has a way of making them believe in themselves." Her words, though simple, grounded him for a moment. By afternoon, back at the house, Daniel found Clara gone. She had left during the night, taking jewelry and gowns, but leaving behind the jagged fragments of what she had tried to build. Her perfume lingered faintly in the hall, but the silence she left behind was louder than anything. Maria folded linens in the sitting room, her lips pressed tight. "Good riddance," she muttered, though her eyes held sorrow, not for Clara, but for the damage inflicted. Daniel sat on the stairs, Lily curled beside him with Rex's head on her lap. "Daddy," she whispered, voice barely audible, "you won't leave me, will you?" The question pierced him deeper than any bullet. He had left too many times, chasing work, chasing justice for others, while his daughter endured cruelty at home. His hand tightened gently around hers. No, never again. Parallel to this quiet moment, in a dim office across town, Clara sat with Marcus Kane, the real estate magnate. Marcus was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered with slicked-back silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. His tailored, and suits masked the ruthlessness of a man who thrived on others' ruin. At his side was Ethan Brooks, a city official in his late 30s, thin and sharp-featured, with restless eyes and an oily charm that masked desperation. Clara's fury burned bright as she recounted the humiliation of the previous night. Marcus leaned back, his voice smooth as poison. "Then we'll make him pay. A man's reputation is easier to break than stone." Ethan smirked, adding, "Especially if his weakness is a child." Their laughter echoed against the office walls, the first threads of a plot weaving together. Back at the Whitmore home, night fell once more. Daniel tucked Lily into bed, her small hands gripping the teddy bear he had meant to give her as a surprise. She whispered, "Thank you, Daddy," before drifting into sleep. Maria stood at the doorway, her face softened by lamplight, murmuring, "She's stronger than she knows, but she needs you to stay." Daniel nodded, his hazel eyes glinting with quiet resolve. For the first time in years, he knew where his duty truly belonged. The house was still, Rex stretched at the foot of Lily's bed, chest rising and falling steadily. Outside, snow began again, soft and relentless. But within the walls of the Whitmore home, the storm had shifted. The weight of absence was heavy, but Daniel had finally chosen to bear it. Morning in Ashford was pale and brittle, the kind of winter light that bleached the world into grays and silvers. The snow had been cleared from Main Street, but icy patches glistened like mirrors where salt had failed to bite. Sergeant Daniel Whitmore walked up the precinct steps with Rex trotting steadily beside him, his leash slack but his attention sharp, amber eyes scanning every movement. Daniel had promised Lily he would return quickly, but duty could not be avoided. He carried himself with the weight of a man determined to balance fatherhood with responsibility, though both pulled at him like anchors in opposite seas. Inside, the precinct was a world of clattering phones, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the shuffle of paperwork. Officers hurried across the lobby, boots echoing against the linoleum. The smell of burnt coffee mingled with the sharp tang of copier ink. Daniel nodded to a few familiar faces, his jaw tight. But the atmosphere felt altered, conversations hushed as he passed, eyes darting away when he looked up. At his desk, Officer Mark Jensen leaned against the divider, his lanky frame awkward in his uniform. Mark was in his early 30s, sandy-haired, with a perpetual nervous energy that made him tap his pen against his thigh whenever silence fell. He respected Daniel, but lacked confidence, often second-guessing himself during patrols. His eyes flicked uneasily before he whispered, "Sarge, there are rumors. Clara's been talking. People are saying you—" He hesitated, lowering his voice further. "That you're unfit. That you neglect Lily. That you lash out at home." Daniel's fists clenched, not from surprise, but from the sting of betrayal. Clara's poison had already begun to spread. "Who told you?" His voice was low, steady. Mark's eyes darted toward the conference room, where two detectives stood, heads close, murmuring. "It's everywhere already," he muttered. "In the papers, too." This morning's Gazette. Daniel strode to the break room, where a stack of newspapers lay. On the front page, below an article about town zoning disputes, a column headline sneered, "Sergeant's Turmoil. Private Scandal Raises Questions." The text twisted the events of that night into a spectacle, portraying Clara as a misunderstood stepmother and hinting that Daniel's temper, hardened by years in uniform, made him a danger in his own home. No names were signed, but Daniel knew the hand of Marcus Kane. Captain Howard Blake summoned him into his office shortly after. The captain's frame filled the chair behind his desk, his white hair stark against the dim light. He gestured for Daniel to sit. "You've served this precinct for nearly 2 decades, Whitmore. I've seen your work, but this—" he tapped the paper. "This sticks, and Kane has friends on the council. You need to tread carefully." His gravelly voice softened for a moment. "Your daughter needs you more than this. Badge does right now." Daniel leaned forward, his voice edged with steel. "I will not let them use Lily to destroy me." Not Kane, not Clara Rex shifted at his feet, letting out a low growl as if echoing his master's resolve. Later that afternoon, Daniel found himself at the Ashford Diner, a place where officers often ate between shifts. The scent of frying bacon and brewed coffee filled the warm air. He chose a booth by the window, Rex lying beneath the table. A waitress, Sophie McLean, approached with a pot of coffee. Sophie was in her late 40s, tall and thin, with sharp cheekbones softened by a tired smile. She had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, but her husband's illness years ago had tied her to the family diner. She was known in town for her frankness, never hesitating to speak truth, even when it stung. Setting the cup before Daniel, she gave him a look that pierced. "Paper says you're a brute at home. I don't believe it. You saved my nephew during that warehouse fire last spring. You're no brute. But Kane's money buys ink. Be careful." Her words were blunt, but they carried a thread of loyalty. A booth across the diner held 2 men murmuring in low tones. Daniel recognized one, Ethan Brooks, the city official who had once sought his endorsement for a zoning proposal. Ethan was slim, restless in movement, his tie loose as though rules chafed him. Across from him sat a reporter Daniel didn't know, a young man with tousled blonde hair and a leather satchel. His notebook was open, pen scribbling quickly. Daniel's stomach turned. More fuel for Kane's fire. That evening, Daniel returned home to find Lily drawing at the kitchen table, her small hands smudged with pencil. She looked up with storm-gray eyes, offering him the paper. It was a picture of the 3 of them, herself, Daniel, and Rex, standing together in a patch of sunlight. The crude lines of a child's hand carried a hope so pure it pierced his chest. Maria stood nearby, folding laundry, her lined face softening. "She's been drawing since you left," she said quietly. It helps her believe tomorrow will be brighter. But even as Daniel admired the drawing, a knock came at the door. It was Evelyn Marsh, Lily's schoolteacher, wrapped in a wool coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. She clutched a folder against her chest. "Sergeant Whitmore, I thought you should see this." Inside were copies of anonymous letters sent to the school board, questioning Lily's well-being, hinting she should be removed from Daniel's care. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with sympathy. "I don't believe them. But if these gain traction—" She trailed off. Daniel's jaw hardened. Clara's cruelty had reached beyond the garden. Now it threatened to rip his daughter from him entirely. He looked down at Lily, who hugged Rex tightly, sensing the tension. He vowed silently that nothing, no rumor, no smear, would sever the bond forged in that snowy garden. Outside, The wind picked up again, rattling the windows. Ashford lay quiet under its winter shroud, but beneath the silence cracks were widening, in Daniel's badge, his reputation, and the fragile peace he had only just begun to build. The following night, the Whitmore home was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the soft rustle of Rex shifting in his sleep by the fireplace. Daniel sat at his desk, the dim glow of a desk lamp casting sharp shadows across the files spread before him. He had spent hours reviewing reports, trying to trace Marcus Kane's fingerprints on the rumors, but all he found were fragments, snippets of gossip, and unsigned letters. His hazel eyes burned with fatigue, yet he refused to let despair claim him. Upstairs, Lily slept with her teddy bear tucked against her chest, her breath even at last. Maria Alvarez appeared in the doorway, hesitant. She was shorter than most, her frame lean and wiry from decades of housework. But tonight, her shoulders hunched under a burden heavier than laundry baskets or scrubbing floors. Her dark eyes shimmered with unease. In her hands, she clutched a small flash drive and an envelope yellowed at the edges. Her voice was low, accented with the Spanish roots she had never shed. "Mr. Whitmore, there is something I must tell you, something I should have told you long ago." Daniel leaned back, studying her with cautious patience. Maria had been with the family for years, invisible in the way housekeepers often were, yet constant. Her silence had been her armor, but now it cracked. She stepped inside, setting the objects on the desk with trembling fingers. "I went into Clara's old study after she left. I thought I might find letters, maybe bills, but I found this, hidden in a drawer she thought no one used." She pushed the flash drive forward. "It contains emails, bank records, payments, conversations with Marcus Kane and Ethan Brooks. She wasn't just bitter, she was working with them." Daniel's jaw tightened. He picked up the envelope and slid the contents out. Photocopies of wire transfers, dates matching the articles that had smeared his name. Clara's voice came back to him, taunting, "You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll see how fast Ashford turns on a man who lets his weakness show." The proof lay before him. Maria's voice wavered. "I kept quiet because I was afraid. Years ago, when I worked for another family, I spoke out against the master's cruelty. He ruined me. No one would hire me until you took me in. I thought if I stayed silent, I could keep my place. But I watched Lily suffer, and last night I could not bear it anymore. She deserves better. You deserve to know." Tears welled in her lined eyes, but her spine straightened with conviction. Daniel felt a rare swell of gratitude. "Maria, you've carried this alone too long. Thank you. This could change everything." Rex lifted his head, ears pricked, as though sensing the shift in the air. The German shepherd padded closer, resting his head on Maria's knee for a moment before returning to Daniel's side. The gesture loosened something in her chest. She let out a small, shaky laugh. "Even your dog knows I was wrong to wait." The next morning, Daniel arranged to meet Linda Harper, a county prosecutor known for her sharp mind and unflinching integrity. Linda was in her late 30s, with olive-toned skin, dark curly hair cropped to her shoulders, and a presence that filled the room without ever raising her voice. She had grown up the daughter of a steelworker, watching her father be cheated by employers, and vowed young to fight corruption wherever it hid. She welcomed Daniel into her office at the courthouse, her desk stacked with case files in meticulous order. "Sergeant Whitmore," she greeted, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. "I've heard whispers about your situation. Bring me proof, and I can turn whispers into indictments." Daniel set the flash drive and envelope on her desk. Linda inserted the drive, scanning quickly through the files. Her brows furrowed, then arched. "Emails, transfers, even draft articles. This is strong, but we'll need corroboration, witnesses, and chain of custody." She looked up, her dark eyes narrowing. "Where did you get this?" Maria, who had come along, clasped her apron nervously. "From Clara's desk. She never locked it. I thought it might be nothing, but—" Linda cut her off with a small smile. "It is not nothing. It is enough to start." As they spoke, a knock came at the office door. A man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, his blonde hair cropped short, a badge clipped to his belt. Detective Samuel Hayes. Hayes was in his early 40s, a man with a reputation for skepticism, his pale blue eyes always dissecting details others missed. He had grown up in a family of farmers, used to storms and disappointment, which had carved into him a stubborn pragmatism. "Harper," he said in his gravelly voice, "you called me?" Linda gestured toward Daniel. "Detective Hayes will review this evidence with me. He has no ties to Kane's people, which makes him rare." Hayes inclined his head toward Daniel. "I'll be honest, Sergeant, I don't trust easily. But if this is real, I'll back you." They worked late into the day, piecing together timelines, marking dates when payments aligned with smear articles. Linda outlined a plan to file preliminary motions within a week. Daniel listened, his fury tempered by a cautious hope. For the first time since Clara's betrayal, the cracks in his badge no longer felt fatal. They felt like openings where truth could break through. Meanwhile, across town, Clara met Marcus Kane in a dimly lit lounge reserved for the city's wealthy. Marcus lounged in a leather chair, his silver hair gleaming under chandeliers. "You said you could ruin him," he reminded her. Clara, dressed in black silk now rather than gold, clenched her jaw. "I humiliated myself for your plan, Marcus. He threw me out, but I won't stop until he's destroyed." At a nearby table, unnoticed by them, a waitress named Sarah Doyle overheard fragments of their conversation. Sarah was in her mid-20s, tall and slender, with long chestnut hair tied back in a braid. She was quiet, polite with patrons, but her life had been hardened by years of caring for her younger brother after their parents died in a factory fire. That night she lingered near Clara and Marcus's table, catching enough to realize they were plotting against Daniel. She slipped into the kitchen with her tray, her heart pounding, already weighing whether she should risk everything to warn him. Back at the courthouse, as Daniel prepared to leave, Linda placed a hand on his arm. "This will not be quick. Kane has money, allies, and influence, but he also has arrogance. Arrogance leaves trails. We'll follow them." Her tone was steady, almost reassuring. That evening, Daniel returned home to Lily and found her at the dining table, drawing again. This time it was a picture of Rex standing tall beside her, larger than life, as though the dog were her guardian angel. She looked up at him with a faint smile. "Daddy, Rex never leaves me." Daniel's chest tightened. "Neither will I." Maria busied herself in the kitchen, humming softly, a sound Daniel realized he hadn't heard in years. It was the sound of a woman who no longer carried her secret alone. Outside, snow fell once more, but inside, for the first time, Daniel felt the faintest promise of victory. The sky above Ashford had turned a color between steel and ash, heavy clouds swelling like fists ready to fall. The courthouse square bustled with ordinary life, vendors setting up their stalls, children dragging sleds across slush. But for Daniel Whitmore, the storm was not in the sky. It brewed in the shadows of powerful men and the lies of a woman who once wore his name. At the precinct, whispers turned into murmurs and murmurs into stares. Detective Samuel Hayes, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, arrived with a folder tucked beneath his arm. He found Daniel in the evidence room, Rex sitting close at his master's heel, ears pricked. Hayes leaned against the table, his blonde hair catching the dim light. "We've got enough to move," he said bluntly. "Transfers, communications, even witness statements. Linda Harper is preparing the paperwork. Tonight, we strike." His tone was cold certainty, the kind of voice born of years chasing criminals who thought themselves untouchable. Linda Harper herself arrived later that afternoon, her curly dark hair damp from the snow that clung to her coat. She carried a briefcase packed with legal motions, her olive-toned face marked with fierce focus. "Judge Green signed the warrants," she said, her voice clipped but steady. "We move before Kane's people know we're on to them. Clara, Marcus, Ethan, we take them all at once." Her determination filled the room, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt the ground beneath his feet solidify. Evening descended quickly. Ashford's streets emptied as the storm overhead finally broke, snow falling in sheets, muffling every sound except the crunch of boots. Teams of officers spread across town, guided by Hayes's instructions. One unit moved toward Marcus Kane's glass tower office, another toward Ethan Brooks's downtown apartment. Daniel was assigned to the operation at his own home, for Clara had been spotted slipping back into Ashford, drunk and disheveled, seeking confrontation. Maria Alvarez kept Lily upstairs, the girl clutching Rex's blanket, while Rex himself stayed glued to Daniel's side, every muscle alert. Daniel's hazel eyes were hard as steel, but beneath the surface his chest tightened with dread. His daughter was about to see her tormentor unmasked. The knock at the door came sharp, then the door burst open. Clara staggered inside, her once golden elegance replaced by a sheen of sweat and wine. Her black dress was wrinkled, pearls askew, hair hanging loose around her pale, furious face. Beside her was Ethan Brooks, tie undone, his thin frame jittery with nerves, cologne failing to mask the smell of liquor. Clara's eyes burned when they landed on Daniel, then slid to the stairs where she knew Lily hid. "You'll never escape me, Daniel," she spat, voice raw. "That child is a curse. She'll drag you under, just like she did her mother." Before Daniel could respond, Hayes and two officers stepped from the shadows of the hall, badges raised. Hayes' voice was curt, every word a nail in a coffin. "Clara Whitmore, Ethan Brooks, you are under arrest for conspiracy and fraud. Put your hands where I can see them." Clara's face twisted, her scream sharp enough to rattle the window panes. "You can't take me! I made this family! I gave him everything and he threw me away for that!" Her words choked as Rex barked, a deep, resonant warning that silenced her rant. Ethan lifted his hands reluctantly, eyes darting for an exit, but Hayes stepped forward, handcuffs clicking with finality. On the staircase, Lily clutched the railing with trembling fingers, her storm-gray eyes wide as she peered down. Maria tried to shield her, but the girl whispered, "I need to see." Her small frame quivered, yet her voice carried fragile defiance. Clara's eyes caught hers, blazing with venom one last time. "You will never be free of me, you wretched little cripple. You'll always be a burden." Daniel's fury exploded, his voice like a thunderclap. "Don't you ever touch her again, not with your hands, not with your words." He stepped forward, planting himself at the foot of the stairs, his broad frame a shield. Rex pressed close, lips curled, ready if danger flickered. Clara faltered, her cruelty spilling uselessly into the storm as Hayes pulled her arms behind her. Outside, sirens wailed through the snow, red and blue lights painting the white streets in fractured color. Marcus Kane's arrest unfolded across town, cameras already flashing as news crews descended. Inside the Whitmore home, silence followed Clara's removal. Only Lily's sobs broke it, soft but cutting. Daniel climbed the stairs slowly, gathering her into his arms. She buried her face in his coat, whispering through tears, "Daddy, promise she's gone." His hand tightened protectively on her back. "She's gone. She'll never hurt you again." Maria stood nearby, her lined face wet with tears, whispering prayers in Spanish under her breath. Hayes watched quietly, his blue eyes softer than usual, then turned away to give them privacy. The storm outside raged, but within the Whitmore home, the first light of justice flickered. The storm passed as suddenly as it had come, leaving Ashford in a hush of white. The morning sun spilled across the rooftops, making the snow sparkle like shards of glass scattered by the sky itself. For the first time in many weeks, the Whitmore home seemed to breathe easier. The echoes of Clara's venom still lingered in Lily's memory, but the house felt steadier, anchored by her father's presence and Rex's watchful eyes. Daniel rose early, the habit of a lawman ingrained too deep to break, but instead of heading to the precinct, he lingered in the kitchen. He brewed coffee and set out breakfast, small gestures of normalcy that felt almost foreign in their simplicity. His hazel eyes softened as he listened to the sound of small feet above. Lily descended slowly, gripping her crutches, her long chestnut hair tangled from sleep. Her storm-gray eyes still carried shadows, but when she saw the plate of pancakes Daniel had made, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Maria Alvarez hovered nearby, apron tied neatly, moving with quiet efficiency. Her lined face looked lighter, as though the burden she had carried had lifted after Clara's arrest. She urged Lily to sit and eat, her Spanish lullabies humming under her breath while she tidied the counters. Later that morning, Daniel walked Lily to the clinic again. Snow crunched beneath their boots, Rex padding beside them, his fur gleaming silver in the sunlight. Lily leaned on her crutches but occasionally glanced at her father, as though to be certain he truly walked beside her. At the clinic, doctor, Elaine Foster greeted them warmly. Elaine wore a forest green sweater over her scrubs, her short sandy hair tucked behind her ears. Her blue eyes sparkled with encouragement. "Good to see you back, Lily. Today we'll try the balance bars again." Inside the therapy room, Lily hesitated. The bars stretched across the mat like a gauntlet. She bit her lip, her thin frame trembling. Rex sat obediently near the door, watching intently, his amber eyes fixed on her. Daniel crouched at the end of the bars, his broad frame filling her vision, his voice steady. "One step at a time. I'll be right here." Lily inhaled shakily, then lifted one foot forward. Her legs quivered, but Elaine's hand steadied her. Another step, then another. Sweat beaded on her forehead, yet determination flared in her eyes. By the end of the bars, she collapsed into Daniel's waiting arms, breathless but triumphant. For the first time in months, she laughed, a sound fragile but bright. Meanwhile, across town, Ashford began whispering a different story. The Gazette had been forced to publish a retraction after Linda Harper filed motions citing Clara and Marcus's conspiracy. Some townsfolk who had sneered now looked away in shame. Others offered quiet nods of respect. Sophie McLean, the diner waitress, mentioned to every customer who would listen, "That man loves his daughter." I saw it in his eyes when he came in. The tide was slowly turning. In the evenings, Daniel and Lily found themselves joined by new visitors. One was Helen Moore, a rehabilitation nurse recommended by Dr. Foster. Helen was 35, with curly brown hair and kind hazel eyes behind square glasses. She had once lost her younger brother to an illness, and that grief had driven her to dedicate her life to helping children heal. Her demeanor was calm, her encouragement gentle. She came to the Whitmore house 3 times a week, guiding Lily through stretches and small steps, while Rex lay protectively nearby. Lily, shy at first, grew to trust her, often whispering questions about the exercises or showing her drawings. One evening, neighbors Ruth and Ben Caldwell arrived with baskets of food. Ruth was in her late 50s, plump with rosy cheeks and a warmth that wrapped around anyone near her. Ben, tall and stoic with a weathered face from years working construction, carried the basket without words, but his nod was firm. They had watched from afar for too long and now wanted to stand beside the Whitmores. Ruth kissed Lily's hair and whispered, "You're stronger than you know, darling." Lily flushed with surprise at such open kindness. Daniel, though grateful, struggled with the unease of being cared for. He was a man accustomed to being protector, not recipient. But as he watched Lily glow under the neighbor's attention, he realized healing required more than a badge and his 2 arms. It required community. Parallel to this newfound support, Clara stewed in a holding cell awaiting trial, her anger festering. Marcus Kane's empire cracked further under investigation, his allies scattering like leaves in the wind. Ethan Brooks bargained for leniency, but his confessions only deepened the noose tightening around Kane's neck. Yet Daniel knew battles of law move slowly. Healing at home had to move faster. Weeks passed, and Lily improved. One afternoon, she surprised everyone by walking across the living room with only one crutch, Rex padding beside her, his head tilted proudly. Daniel's hazel eyes misted as he clapped softly, and Maria murmured prayers of thanks. Lily grinned, cheeks flushed, and whispered, "I did it, Daddy." He knelt to embrace her, his voice hoarse. "You did, sweetheart, and you'll do even more." That night, Daniel sat by Lily's bed as she sketched. She handed him the paper, a drawing of herself standing tall without crutches, Rex beside her, the sun blazing overhead. "Do you think this can happen?" she asked. Daniel traced the lines with his rough fingers, then looked into her storm-gray eyes. "I believe it already has. Every step you take is a miracle." As the wind whispered outside and snow glimmered under the moon, the Whitmore home no longer felt like a place of shadows. It had become a place where healing grew, slow but steady, nurtured by love, loyalty, and the quiet strength of a child who refused to give up. Spring crept slowly into Ashford, pushing back the last crusts of snow with blades of green. The lake at the edge of town shimmered under the thaw, its surface dotted with ducks returning from migration. The sky that morning was washed in gold, the kind of light that seemed to promise renewal. Daniel Whitmore stood by the lake's worn path, his broad frame wrapped in a lighter coat now that winter had retreated. His hazel eyes softened as he watched his daughter, Lily, place her crutches carefully on the grass and prepare for her next attempt. Lily was thinner than most children her age, but her storm-gray eyes glowed brighter these days. The scars of her accident still shaped her steps, yet her laughter had returned, timid but persistent. She wore a pale yellow dress Ruth Caldwell had sewn for her, the hem stitched with daisies. Her chestnut hair, tied back with a ribbon, fluttered in the mild breeze. Rex walked beside her, fur gleaming silver and black, tail high, ears alert to every sound. He had become her shadow, her guard, and her cheerleader all at once. Dr. Elaine Foster had come too, her sandy hair tucked under a cap, as she carried a small stopwatch. She was joined by Helen Moore, the rehabilitation nurse, her glasses fogging slightly in the cool air. Both women clapped quietly as Lily positioned herself at the chalk line Daniel had drawn across the path. Elaine's voice carried warmth. "Take it slow, Lily. Just remember to breathe," Helen added, smiling, "and keep your eyes on your dad. He's your finish line." Nearby, Maria Alvarez spread a blanket on the grass, her frail hands busy unpacking food from a basket. She looked smaller than ever, but her lined face was serene. Years of silence had weighed her down, yet now she hummed under her breath, a tune of peace. Beside her sat Ruth and Ben Caldwell, the neighbors who had become family in every way but name. Ruth was rosy-cheeked, her laughter bubbling as she teased Ben about his poor attempt at slicing bread. Ben, stoic as always, only grunted but slid the plate closer to her anyway. A few townsfolk had gathered as well, drawn by whispers of Lily's progress. Among them was Sarah Doyle, the tall, slender waitress who had once overheard Clara and Marcus plotting. She wore a simple blue dress, her chestnut braid swinging over one shoulder. Life had made her cautious, yet she had grown close to the Whitmores, offering quiet support. Today she clapped along, her brother, a boy of 12 with sandy hair and curious eyes, beside her, cheering with youthful eagerness. Lily's breath hitched as she began, one step, then another. Her knees wobbled, but her arms steadied against the crutch. Halfway down the path, she faltered. Daniel's heart clenched, his hands twitching to rush forward, but he remembered Elaine's advice. Let her fight her own battle. "I'm right here," he said hoarsely, voice carrying across the path. "Every step, I'm with you." Rex barked once, a sound that seemed to jolt her courage. Lily gritted her teeth, wiped sweat from her brow, and pushed onward. When she reached the final chalk mark, she stumbled, but instead of falling, she straightened, her face flushed, her gray eyes blazing with pride. Laughter burst from her lips, wild and unrestrained. The crowd clapped, Maria cried into her apron. Ruth hugged Ben tightly, and Daniel rushed forward, scooping Lily into his arms. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You walked farther than ever." Lily pressed her cheek against his shoulder, breathless. "I don't want pity anymore, Daddy. I just want your love." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest aching with emotion. "You have all of it. All I am belongs to you." They sat together on the blanket afterward, the community circling close. Elaine jotted notes in her pad, smiling to herself. Helen passed water to Lily, praising her progress. Sarah Doyle's brother shyly offered Rex a biscuit, which the German shepherd accepted with surprising gentleness. Sarah herself stood a little apart, watching with a softness in her eyes. Life had taught her that families often broke apart, yet here she witnessed one rebuilt by choice and courage. Later, as the sun dipped lower, Lily pulled out a folded paper from her small satchel. She handed it to Daniel, her hands smudged with charcoal. It was a drawing of herself standing tall, hand in hand with her father, Rex beside them. Above, the sun blazed, its rays sketched as wide arms embracing them all. "This is us," she said shyly. "I think we can be happy like this forever." Daniel studied the lines, crude but full of light. He pressed the paper against his chest, hazel eyes burning. "We already are," he murmured. Around them the lake shimmered, the breeze carrying laughter and the scent of spring blossoms. The Whitmore home had seen storms, betrayals, and nights heavy with despair. But on that day, with Lily's laughter ringing and Rex sprawled contentedly in the grass, golden light poured across them. It was not just sunlight. It was hope made visible, a reminder that scars could heal, families could mend, and love could outlast any darkness. In the end, this story reminds us that even in the darkest storms, the light of God can break through. What seemed impossible for a broken child and a weary father became possible through love, faith, and the quiet miracles that only He can provide. In our daily lives, we too face struggles that leave us feeling weak or forgotten. But every step forward, no matter how small, is proof that God is walking beside us. If this story touched your heart, please share it so that others may find hope. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story meant to you. And if you believe in the miracles of God, type Amen in the comments. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His light guide your path each day. And remember to subscribe so you can join us again for more stories of faith, healing, and second chances.